I have a feeling this is going to be a video podcast. And I went and I oh, it's not? Okay.
Oh, no.
Okay. But I got pretty for you.
Oh, but you do. You look gorgeous.
Because all my podcasts, and as you know, from our radio days, nobody cared how he looked. It's like,
I know. Remember when all of a sudden you had to like be posing for pictures? You're like, wait, we're in radio. What the heck?
Wait, I have to comb my hair? And I don't know where my lipstick is. Zero idea.
I wore my pajamas to work again.
Because morning radio, even afternoon radio. Yeah, so.
Has your life, your dreams been interrupted? Good news. It is possible to reinvent our lives. People are doing it every day, and some are brave enough to share the struggles, disappointments, and challenges. If you are looking for a new beginning, a do-over, or to rediscover your passion, maybe even find a new one, then grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Interrupted, Act 2, Reinventing Your Legacy, with your host, Coach Lori.
I'm so happy to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast. So I have two podcasts. The first podcast is one I've done with my longtime radio partner, who you know, Pat Cashman. And he and I had so much fun on the air that we decided after we got off the air, for a variety of reasons. Well, let's just call it what it is. We got fired 8 million times. We got fired.
Right. Welcome to radio.
Right. Exactly. But we had such a great time that it was over 10 years ago. We decided, you want to do a podcast? Just have fun and whatever, whoever tunes in, we don't care. So that podcast has been going strong. We're well over 10 years now. And that is called Peculiar Podcast. And we have a Facebook page and we have a website, and it's not episodic, meaning you can jump in on any episode. We don't even remember what we said last week. So we couldn't possibly, have a thread continuing throughout it. It's just dumb stuff that we talk about. But we have a really good time with that. And it's relaxed. It's easy. We get to do what we want instead of corporate telling us what we have to say and how to say it. That's a lot of fun. And then I have another podcast that I just started last year, and that is called Hello VO. And that is for people who are brand new, emerging talent that wants to get into the voiceover industry. So I just do some episodes. About once a month, I'll drop an episode that'll be talking about a specific part of the industry. And this is just designed to get people the basics. Because a lot of times people go, I want to do voiceovers, but I don't know where to start. So this is all just designed to give you some tools. LisaFoster.com. Couldn't be simpler.
Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Lori. I'm so glad to talk to you.
So Lisa and I worked together for about a minute at Metro Traffic because, as she mentioned, unless you've been fired 3,000 times, you're really not officially a DJ.
Right. Yeah. I remember the first time I got fired, how horrified I was. And all the seasoned radio people went, "Oh, welcome to the club." And I went, "Really? That's how it goes?" They're like, "Oh yeah, that's how it goes."
I remember, rest in peace, Steve Poole saying that on TV one time. And he said, unless you've been fired at least once, if not more, it's not the real thing. It made me so happy because in this business, the people, our family, I don't know about you, but my family and friends, every Christmas when radio stations do the big cuts and they fire a zillion people.
Right.
And my family's like, oh my gosh, how do you handle that? It's like, we feel sad, especially when it's people we love and we cry and we feel guilty. We have survivor's guilt. I did when I'm still there, but it's the industry and it's what happens. That is why I love podcasting.
Right. I don't know if this was the case for you, but I also learned it's not a failure to be fired, first of all. But second of all, failure is necessary anyway, even if you want to categorize it as such. Failure is necessary for growth. It opened up new doors for me that I didn't think I was going to get into. I know they say it can be a blessing, and it doesn't feel like it at the time. If there's anything going on in our lives that feel particularly heavy or unfair. Well, first of all, life's unfair. Get used to it. Don't act like a child, which I'm pointing at myself right now. Put your big girl panties on. Once you dusted yourself off, you realize, wow, this is giving me some opportunities I didn't even think I could think about. Yeah. Being fired, That's just redirection. That's all that is, redirection.
I want to talk about your podcast, especially I love that yours is about voiceover, because for me working in radio, often people will say, oh, I want to get in voiceover. What do I do? Now we have so many options. Back in the day, we couldn't even record at home. Unless we had a little cassette recorder, and those were never, the quality was never acceptable, really.
Right. Or you had $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 to build a home studio in your home, and that's not the case these days. But yeah, you're right. It wasn't even a thing. And the market that we're in Seattle, that's not where you lived if you wanted to do voiceovers. Back in the day, you were told to go to Los Angeles or go to New York.
Remote was not an option.
Not an option. The internet changed so many things for not just our industry, but even the radio industry. It's changed things a lot. I might be speaking out of turn, but having local talent isn't really anything that these big radio stations even think about. You can pipe anybody in from anywhere to do whatever.
And they do. And what's interesting to me is being in the industry, we try to keep the secrets, the mystery of radio, as though we were there. But also there are stations that I have friends that they'll listen and they'll love the morning show and they think they're local. And
right.
When I say, oh, they're in Texas, they're like, wait, what?
Yep.
And then they're mad. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said something. But
yeah, I remember one of the times that Pat Cashman and I got fired, and one of them.
I love it.
I don't know. I lost track. And they replaced us. We were on a talk show. We were on a talk station. Gosh, I think it was either The Buzz, which is no longer, and it might have been Como. No, maybe it wasn't Como. I can't remember. Who knows? I was on so many stations. But they replaced us with a morning team from Los Angeles. All of Seattle had a litter of kittens about that. They're like, we don't want Los Angeles people in Seattle. We want Seattle people. Of course, they weren't outraged that Pat and I got fired. They just wanted some Seattle people in our chairs. But yeah, you're right. It's not super new. They started kind of doing that, I would say, 20 years ago, sort of integrating. And now it's a thing now that live and local radio is a dinosaur.
It is. But in my opinion, that is going to be the ultimate survival of radio, is the live and local aspect, because even though we have the internet, when COVID hit, I've always said traffic is job security.
You are right, because you and I both started in the traffic realm.
Right.
And by the way, I loved being a traffic reporter. So much fun. Yeah. But you're right. I didn't think about that. Yeah. During COVID.
And during COVID, and every day I would go in and I think, this is the day they're going to go. There's no, I was driving in the HOV lane, for heaven's sakes. And one day I went, wait a minute. It's such a habit. But what happened is the boss at the time, who then with COVID, we lost so many people. But the boss at the time, he said, why don't you go look around for anything local, any restaurants, anything local that's happening that's not on the bigger news, and we'll just that'll be your traffic. So things that were closing, things that were opening, restaurants that you could drive up and just pick up. So I started doing that aspect, which was really fun. And I feel like people really appreciated that because they want to know what's going on in their own community.
Right. Yeah. That's a really smart pivot to figure out what can we put in its place. And it turned out to be, I didn't even think of that, something that was very valuable for people who kind of didn't know what was going on. It was such a novel time for everyone in a negative way. That what a really brilliant thing to be able to do. But now we've got traffic again, Lori. So yes. There you go.
So much traffic.
So much traffic.
And we can do traffic from a home now, so we don't even have to get caught in it. So Lisa, what I would like to do, there's a couple things, because you come from the radio background. So I would love for you to talk about what it takes to do voiceover.
Yes.
And give some of your tips and tricks, and also some of your pet peeves, because as we know, now that anybody can do a podcast and they've never had radio training, there's some really big, I feel like it's like when a detective watches a cop show, they're going, oh my gosh, we do not do DNA that fast. I feel like sometimes I feel like a radio snob. So I thought it would be fun for you to share your pet peeves too. So first off, talk about voiceover, and then we can get into pet peeves.
Okay, sounds good. Let me speak to that super quick because I tell my students who I coach voiceovers, exactly what you just said. I said the more you learn your craft, the more you cannot consume content the way normal people do who don't hear any of these problems. It does ruin you for casual consumption of movies and commercials, and you're like, did you hear that? Like, did you hear that? No, that sounds terrible. That. So yeah, I totally get it. I actually was doing voiceovers part-time while I was on the radio. As you know, part of our job as an on-air talent after we got off of live radio was to go into the production studio at the radio station and voice the local mattress ad, the local car dealership, the flooring guy, all these, right? That was sort of our job. We didn't get paid extra for it, by the way. That was all part of our job. Just get in there and do it. So I was doing voiceovers, but I was also doing some voice work on the side as well back then. So I guess I should give people an idea of what we're talking about here. So this is mid-90s, late 90s, what do we call them now? 2000 aughts?
Yeah.
2000 aughts? Is that what we say?
Yeah,
Something
let's go with that.
It sounds very upper crust, doesn't it? Yes. In the early 2000 aughts. Once I had gotten fired again, I said, you know what? The internet had come around. So this is around the early 2000 aughts. I thought, you know what? I had to sit out a contract. I could not go on the air, which hurt my feelings a little bit that they would rather pay me to not be on the air. They said, we don't like you at all. In fact, we don't like you to the point we will pay you to not even come in and do your job. That's how much we don't like you. And I had a non-compete in my contract. So I had a whole year just to sleep in and sit around and think about things. Think about what I had done. You think about what you did, Lisa Foster. But it occurred to me that, you know what, maybe this is the time I had this opportunity. I got fired and I'm like, I would have never taken the time to think about voiceovers as a full-time gig. And now, because the internet made it possible to connect with voice clients all over the world, all over the globe, I didn't have to put on clean pants and go anywhere. I could do it from home. And so I spent that year focusing on how to get going and how to get up and running. 20 years later, it's so hard to believe, 20 years later, this industry has gotten much bigger, has expanded, nearly doubled in talent fees and revenue in the last decade alone. I was able to sit out the contract. I did a little fill-in work now and then because it was kind of fun to do. But for the most part, I got into voiceovers, learned my craft, got up and running. What I always tell people is I think it's important to know that this is a real job and a real career. I don't sugarcoat how difficult this can be sometimes to do this industry. You're a freelancer. You work for yourself. You don't get that paycheck every 2 weeks. The worst day in voiceovers beats the best day in corporate America, in my book, any day. There you go. That's how I kind of got into it. I also now do script writing. I'm also a voiceover coach. Love my podcast, Hello VO, kind of gives lots of folks who want basic information of how to get going. Check that out. I'm always eager to share with people. I think it's important to lower the ladder down to the next group of people who want to know what you do. I really think that's important. And if you have any measure of success in anything that you do, share that. I think that's really important to feel. And it's a blast for me. I just meet the greatest people who are so interested. And not everybody wants to do voiceovers. That's the other thing. Once they start to learn a little bit about it, there's a lot of people I meet with great voices that go, you know what? I don't really want to do voiceovers. It's not for everyone.
I love that you say, let's put the ladder down. Let's share our experience. I teach podcasting and my big motto is push record. Now, do I want them to publish everything? No, but I want them to hear their voice because back in the beginning, we would make our air check tapes and we would be so proud of them. And then 5 years down the road, we'd find our first air tape and we want to get a hammer and ruin it.
Yep.
But it's doing the thing. It's taking the step. I love when people, when in radio, we get air checked. So our boss says, hey, come in. I'm going to take some segments, some breaks that you've done. I'm going to listen. And we have to listen back to our own voice. We have to listen to the ones that are cringeworthy or the ones that were, hey, maybe really good. But I feel like a lot of podcasters aren't listening back to their work. They could really get more listeners if they would get a voice coach or a voiceover coach. For instance, our good friend John Nelson.
Yes.
Love John Nelson.
John.
Hi,
John, if you're listening.
On KIRO, we worked evenings. I was on Como. He was on KIRO. And he got caught because we do this. We get in a rut. And every other report, he would say, miles of misery. And the program director called, it was Ursula, I think, said, he says, miles of misery. One more time, he's fired.
Was that for the traffic report that he got in this? Yeah.
He said to me, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I just got in this habit. If I can bring anything to the podcast world, one, I want people to talk better, and we'll talk about that with pet peeves. But number two, listen to yourself so that you don't get caught up in those euphemisms or what. It's so easy to do that and waste everyone's time with a bunch of words that don't matter.
Yeah, word salad, cliches, those are things for live broadcasting and podcasting. Now, voiceovers, things are scripted, so we usually we're reading somebody else's words, but voiceover training and that sort of discipline can really be valuable in public speaking, live recorded podcasts, live radio, all of those things. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good piece of advice to give people. Listen to yourself. You've got to know you got to know what you sound like. I think having somebody else's ear on your product is good because you might not know what your bad habits are. You might not know.
And some people are real monotone. It doesn't take that much. I always teach, just maybe once in a while, go up at the end of your sentence. Instead of saying Beacon Plumbing, go Beacon Plumbing. Like just change it up a little.
Right. That's all technique. That's all technique in terms of delivery and how to sound natural, believable. And you got to speak from the heart. You got to sound genuine. Getting vocal coaching and training is really important. When you said old air checks and you listen back to them and go, oh my gosh, that's so much. But the nice thing, I have the very first commercial I ever voiced 1,000 years ago. It was before electricity was invented, in fact. But I have it. And it is a train wreck. I didn't know what I was doing. This is back in Sacramento. The engineer wasn't going to help me. Nobody knew anything. I just did it, and it's awful. But what it does show is growth. And that's what I always say to my students. Progress, not perfection. Progress, not perfection. Grow, learn, discover, find your voice. And it's a lot of fun to play. The more you can play, the more you'll discover. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. And I always mention, make all your mistakes with your voice coach. That's who you want to make your mistakes with, not your sponsors and not your listeners.
We live in a world now too where we can edit. So that's beautiful. But how many podcasts do we listen to that don't edit? It's like, could you have taken that sneeze out? Seriously?
Well, unless you make it part of the bit. You know what I mean?
True.
Like Pat would leave that in and then make fun of me. And then we'd have a whole nother topic to go off on. Well, it's allergy season. Well, could you hold it? No, I had to let it out. What do you want?
I love that. That's really true because if you make it part of it, and it's that progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
The first thing we learn in radio, I don't know about you, but the first thing I learned is you're talking to one person.
Right.
The first thing we learn in marketing is if you talk to everybody, you talk to nobody. But something happens when people open the microphone. They feel like they have to say, hey, everybody. And instantly I, as a listener, and maybe because I work in radio, I go, oh, you don't care about me. You're one step up. You're talking to the masses. You're not having coffee with me.
Yeah, you're right. It makes it much more personal when you're able to just connect with the one listener, because you're right. There's 20 people aren't listening to your podcast in the room at the same time. Wouldn't that be nice if they had a little podcast party? You want to hear what some of my pet peeves are?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the first one that I try to get away from, I try to get my students to stop doing, and it's kind of gender specific. I don't hear a lot of male talents doing this, but this is typically a lot of females who have what I call the validation upswing, where they end everything with an upswing, like, welcome to the podcast. My name is Lisa Foster. Wait, what? What are you doing? Stop that. Are you asking me a question? Stop it. And my nieces do this to me. They'll say, Aunt Lisa, we're thinking of coming to see you this weekend. Are you asking me or telling me? What we call validation upswing, or that's sort of a phrase I've used. I don't know if I invented it, but that's what I call it.
I like it.
that is really saying, it's almost like you know,
lack of confidence.
Yeah. So there are times that you can use that. I use it occasionally, but if it is a constant pattern, so I guess the first thing I would say is upswings and or any patterns of any sort. As you spoke to earlier, don't be a monotone. That's a pattern. Have some variety in where you speak in terms of pitch. What words do we pull up and what words do we pull down? But upswings, just annoying to listen to. I have such a hard time. You're going to start hearing it now that I've put it in your ear. You're going to hear it all over the place.
When I went to Toastmasters, they wanted you to not say, so they would like honk a horn or click something.
I remember that. Yeah.
And so what did I do? Then I was saying, So is there a trick to stop that validation upswing? I love that.
Here's my tip. Just stop it. No, I don't know. I don't know what the tip. Here's what the tip is. And this goes back to what you said. You can solve almost any bad habit you have with a good coach and the ability to practice. Your voice goes with you everywhere. There is no reason. I tell my students, I'm not teaching you the guitar. You can't practice the guitar in the car. You can't. But you can be practicing using your voice. And one of the ways you can do that is listen to commercials that are on the air. You're not going to hear them doing an upswing. Maybe you will if they're amateurs. Come to Joe's Flooring and everything's on sale. Stop it. Stop doing that. It just makes me want to tear my ears out. It makes me want to tear my ears out. But you can practice and get a good ear. And I also think that's something to what you said earlier was listen back to what you do. That's how you get a good ear. So when you start to know that you do upswings, every time your coach points it out to you, you'll start to hear it and then you'll be able to correct it.
I love that. What's another one?
My other pet peeve is, and this is more of an age, I think it's a generational thing. I don't hear too many older people doing this, but it's this kind of vocal fry thing that people like to do. It's this sort of affectation. You hear the fry. Oh my gosh, stop doing that. Stop frying out your voice. Vocal fry is very unappealing to listen to. Think about it this way, whether you're doing voiceovers or radio or podcasting, you want your voice to be as inviting and pleasant as possible to keep people tuned into your message. That is the whole point of any of this. Try to work on how do you sound inviting. Now, unless it's a speech pathology issue or you have a medical problem going on, then don't try to sound like really cool here. It's just not, I don't like it. And I know you think you're being cool. I hate it. You're going to hear vocal fry everywhere.
Oh my gosh. I love this. I love this because I feel like it's giving credibility to that. Yes, anybody can podcast, but let's do a podcast. If we, like you shared, if we have experience, let's do a podcast and let's do it in a way that people can actually hear and benefit from our experience.
Yeah. You're not just opening your mic and your mouth just to hear you speak. Hopefully you're giving good content and value. Yeah. I think that's very important that you have a voice that can deliver that well. And I don't mean a good voice is subjective, right? I mean, there's lots of people who can't stand my voice. Trust me. They wrote into the radio station. Trust me. I know lots of people who would write into the radio station and say, I can't stand that woman's voice.
Oh my gosh.
Fine. That's fine. That's not, so a good voice is subjective, but getting rid of bad habits is really something you can control and understand. How do I present in the best way possible, keep my listeners engaged and just be something they want to tune in and hear.
There's another thing too. And so I'm going to say you and Pat Cashman are celebrities. And so people in Seattle,
are we? I didn't know that.
People know you. So if you start with a little banter, they like that because they feel like, oh my goodness, the average podcaster isn't a celebrity. And so what I tell them, and this is the second thing we learned in radio, hit the road running. Yes. So for instance, if I'm going to do traffic, I'm not going to say, so like, are you in Bellevue or Seattle? Cause, I was just noticing on my map here, like, shut up and get to it. 405 at I-90, there's an accident in the right lane, scoot over. And
Right.
then if I want to BS or chit chat, get the information out first. And then they have the decision. Oh, I'm going to stick around for it or I can leave. But it's respectful to the listener to get to it.
That's a really good point. You shouldn't make them wait for what it is they're going to get. I love that. I didn't even think of that concept of, lay out, here's what today's episodes were, what we're going to do, and then get to the thing. I like that a lot. I think that's very smart.
We have the tease in radio. So we do tease to get them to stick around. But also when we get to it, let's get to it. And have you ever watched a video where they're going to show you something and then they're going to show you something and then 20 minutes later you're like, holy crap, do it already. Then I leave. I'm like, I don't care how those whatever matches that are all set up are going to fall. I just don't even care anymore. I know they're trying to get get to it.
Yeah. That should be your goal, is not to get minutes. Your goal, really, I think one of the loveliest things we can do as human beings is to give value, give something that's valuable. And that should be your goal. What's valuable to people? Yes.
And I think as a DJ, what I've noticed, if you're from Seattle, you've probably heard of Delilah. So I work at Warm 106.9, which is a number one station in Seattle. Mm-hmm. But when I meet new people or they find out where I work, they don't say, oh my gosh, I listen to you all the time. They go, do you know Delilah? Or they say, yes, I don't listen to the radio.
Right. Well, now you know what it feels like to be me, because everybody would say, oh, nice to meet you. Do you know Pat Cashman? Yes, I know Pat Cashman. Yes, I do. But Lori, can I ask you, do you know Delilah? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, seriously.
Do you know her? No.
She won't accept my friend request.
Oh. Hey, you're probably not the first. So anyway.
Like, I'm on a rampage. Two things I want to talk about. One is that we talk in a way that people feel like they're the only one, because we're coming out of COVID. People are lonely. And I thought, I was on all these Zooms and all these calls where people were saying, hey, everybody. Hey, you guys. And I felt assaulted. And I thought, well, it's just me. But then I start asking around, and it's like people, when we group them into groups, they don't feel special. And the intimate thing about radio is that people feel like they're in their car. They feel like you're talking to them. Right. And that matters. They know you're not. Right. But it matters. And that's a big priority for me when I teach podcasting. It's like, if you walk away from this class with anything, it's talk to one person. And the other thing, and you and so I never recommend 2 podcasts because most people barely can do one.
Right.
But because we come from radio, we're used to doing the public affairs show and then the interview show. And then there is a place for that. But also, even in your voiceover one, you probably talk about more than voiceover.
I try to keep the content based on whatever topic, but I will weave in a story about my experience, but I try not to make it about me. I think, although it's interesting because the podcast that I do with Pat is all about us. But that's just meant to be, it's just nonsense. We just talk about whatever is impacting us. And for some reason that connects with a lot of people who go, oh, that happened to me too. Mm-hmm. So my podcasts are very different. It's a really great point you brought up. I hadn't thought about that. My voiceover podcast is very much about instruction and learning. And then the Peculiar podcast is strictly entertainment, dumb entertainment, if I may use that.
I don't know if you remember Claire. She was on with Fitz in the Morning for a while.
Yeah.
She's in Salem now. And when she got fired,
welcome to the club, Claire.
Me and my friend Anna D, who you might recognize from Traffic.
Anna
Bobana. We went into the boss and we said, hey, we know she's fired, but she's good people. Can we keep her on our podcast? Because it was a radio. It was for the radio station was saying, hey, let's do podcasts. So we just do pop culture. But we have such a great time. But for the average person who's going to do a podcast, because maybe they have things that they want to impart. Maybe they want to talk about recovery, or maybe they want to talk about, maybe they're a counselor, is that I really encourage them to do one and then maybe have a few pillars. This one lady who's Insta kind of phenom, Jenna Kuchar, her 3 things were digital photography, infertility, because they were walking through that, and macaroni and cheese. Like, seriously, she would do whole episodes on different types of macaroni and cheese, which sounds ridiculous, but that's that self-revealing. When I teach podcasting, I always say it's not about you. And that's why I say with you and Pat, you're celebrities, people know who you are. If we start with, this is who I am, people don't care. They don't care about you. Tell me what I need, and then I will care about who you are. So I always say, if you're going to do an episode saying who you are, make it number 10. Make it down the road, because people don't care. And I don't mean that mean. It's just, nobody's going to go Google Lori Hardy. They're going to Google, I'm in my 60s. How do I start a new career? We want to give people what they're looking for, and then they'll want more of us. And I think that's really important, because if I get on a podcast and it's all about them just to set the stage.
Yeah, it's about creating a relationship. That's really what it's about. People aren't going to really want to be in a relationship with you till they know what you're bringing to the table. Yeah, you make a great point that Pat and I have. People know what they're getting with us, and that's why they're going to tune in. They already know what we bring to the table because we were on the air for so long. Those are the people who appreciate our weirdness and our brand of storytelling. But my other podcast, it's just me. I'm bringing more valuable content for a subject that people want to know more about. So it's less about me and making sure I give them what things I think might help, and sharing things that helped me become a steady working voiceover actor. It's funny, I don't talk about that stuff in Peculiar Podcasts. It's very interesting. You really made me realize these are 2 very different genres of podcasting. And there's so many different genres of podcasting that I don't even know. I just do these 2. That's as far as I've gone with it. It's Hello VO. I tell people, you cannot learn how to do voiceovers from a video. You can't learn it from a book. I love it when people go, oh yeah, I bought a book on voiceovers. I'm like, how's that going? How exactly is that going? Because I bought a book on scuba diving and I still can't scuba dive. You got to go do the thing. And why not do the thing with somebody who's already doing the thing? I'm already doing what you want to do. Let me share with you what helped me. And so I love that you're helping people with podcasting. Can I ask you a question? I know this is your podcast and your interview, but do you mind if I ask you a question?
I would love it.
Okay. So when you are coaching people who want to start a podcast or improve perhaps their current podcast, are you really focusing on content creation in that? Or are you also helping them with the technical side of, because a lot of people will say to me, I don't even know, like I have an idea for content or whatever, but I don't know, how do I get it out there?
That's a great question. I try to do a little of all of it because technology changes.
That is a really important piece. People think that all they do is sit in front of the microphone for 8 hours. No. There's other pieces and moving parts to this whole baby. And one of the things that I do is I know how to edit. I'm a producer. I know all of this stuff, but I'm insanely weirdly busy all the time. So I actually hired an editor to edit my Hello VO podcast. So he takes out my breaths, my throat clears, that sort of stuff, my sneezes, if I'm sneezing. If I lose my track of my place, I'm like, I have no idea where I'm going. And I'll tell him, I go, edit that out. Let's start. So it's worth it to me to have him do that because it gets my episodes out quicker. You'll spend 3 times as long in the edit bay. So just factor that in, because that is a reality that people sometimes don't realize.
If you use your podcast to bring you clients and you make money, you can afford to have an editor. And that is the purpose. And often people will say, oh, I don't need to make money. No, use your podcast to bring people to your class, to whatever it is that you are wanting to do. Use that to drive traffic, because then it's worth your while. Well, Lisa, oh my goodness, this has been so fun. What is it that you want people to know?
Wow, the first thing, 8,000 things flitted through my head there. But the first thing that jumped out at me, and it's something that's taken me a long time to learn, It is okay to be uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is any new endeavor that you take on, we spend so much time avoiding being uncomfortable. We don't want to, as human beings, we don't want to be in pain. We don't want to be uncomfortable. We work very hard to avoid that. I would suggest that it's not going to kill you to be uncomfortable. It doesn't kill any of us to be uncomfortable. And sometimes that's where you learn a lot of really great stuff. If you can sit with the uncomfortable, so if you have a dream, you want to do a podcast, it's going to be uncomfortable. Just know that going in, it's going to be uncomfortable. Same with voiceovers. I talk to students all the time. They're like, I'm scared. I've got fear. Being uncomfortable is part of the deal. My mom said something really great once. This was when I decided to get into radio and I was super freaked out and scared. And she said, first of all, don't let fear dictate what you do not do in this world, because then you'll never do anything interesting or worthwhile. And then the second thing she said was, you're going to be uncomfortable if you don't pursue your dream, and you're going to be uncomfortable if you do. Pick which uncomfortable you want. Choose which uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable moving forward towards something, or be uncomfortable standing still and not doing anything. I'll tell you which one I'll choose.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you love this podcast, here's a big ask. Will you share with your friends and family, subscribe, give us a review, and a 5-star rating so that others looking to reinvent their lives will be able to get the help they're looking for? Thank you in advance.